Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to today's first video. So we're going to have a bit of a Sunday morning roundup today, as we did last week. We're going to look at things like the Arctic Oscillation, what's happening with the stratosphere. We'll start off with solar activity, and if I've got time I'll talk you through the GFS Ensemble members for Christmas Day, so you can see all the different options that model is showing this morning. So it's going to be quite a long video, but as it's Sunday, we'll push the boat out and add a bit more stuff into today's first video. Later on, we'll have our seasonal interpretation from the ECMWF model, the very exclusive long-range model from the ECMWF that isn't publicly available. I've got an interpretation coming up of that model for you this afternoon. It's covering the period from January through to March, and it'll be around 2-3 o'clock that we'll be releasing that one. So come back this afternoon, check that one out. Before I get on with that, or with this video, just to say about the ads, there's links to articles all over the pages. Have a browse through it and click through the links. If there's any articles that you're interested in, you'll be able to pay website. Thanks so much for doing that. Christmas shop is still open, so you've got any Christmas shop to do at Amazon. Click the green button that takes you to our Christmas shop page, and then from there go through the Amazon banners. That's the key to it all. And because you're going from GWV to Amazon, we get a revenue fee on the things that you are buying. There's still time to get those Christmas presents out to you. Of course, you don't have to do Christmas shopping. You do any shopping you want, really, within the Amazon shop. And I do run it all year round, actually. I just only mention it around Christmas. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Christmas presents, but I assume most people will be shopping on Amazon at the moment for Christmas presents. And you've still got time to get those Christmas presents out to you, but don't leave it too much longer. Right, starting off with solar activity then. This is the solar disk on our side of the disk today from solarham.net. Of course, we've finished with winter updates, so we're looking at solar activity every Sunday in the winter update, seeing what the sunspots were doing. We finish out, but we can still carry on looking at solar activity in the videos, and it's actually going to be another Solar Sunday at some point in the new year, probably in January, so we'll have a more detailed look then. But I thought I'd just have a quick look and see what's happening on the solar disk, on our side of the disk, and it's pretty blank. Look at that, no sunspots at all, so we've gone spotless at the moment. Very quiet on the solar disk on our side of the disk. Of course, you expect this because we are declining now into solar minimum. We'll be reaching solar minimum in a couple of years, so you'd expect sunspot numbers to be reducing. But there we go, gone spotless again. James has updated the Gas Weather Vid's solar activity tracker. We're looking at this through the winter updates. So this is how the latest is looking. Now, we did get a little bit of a spike in sunspot numbers at the start of December. Look at that. We really picked up those sunspots for a few days during the opening few days of December. But clearly we're crashing down with those sunspot numbers again now, and this is where we are, the latest up to yesterday anyway. I think today's will look very similar, which is no sunspot numbers whatsoever. Now, you remember that through the winter updates, the trend lines were all moving downwards in terms of those sunspot numbers from where we started here at the beginning of September. But actually, this ramp up in sunspot numbers there that we had at the start of December was enough to lift the trend line up a little bit, or the trend lines lifted up a little bit through those opening days of December. Now, we're just starting to tick back down again with the trends. Although we are moving into solar minimum, of course, what you have to remember is that it's not a linear process, so you do get movements upwards in terms of these sunspot numbers on a day-by-day basis. But the trend is downwards, obviously, as we move through into solar minimum. And as I say, we've got a couple of years actually before we will be in true solar minimum. The reason we look at sunspot activity is because when we have low levels of sunspot numbers and we have minimal activity on the sun, the reasons aren't understood, but it does tend to coincide with an increased risk of high latitude blocking. High latitude blocking, which is high pressure sitting over the Arctic, essentially, is our route to getting proper cold winter weather. So around solar minimum, just after solar minimum, tends to be the best time to get cold winters, particularly for the UK and Europe. It's less so for America and for Asia, but for the UK and Europe, probably due to reducing the energy in the jet stream coming through the Atlantic, it tends to coincide around solar minimum and just after, with an increased chance of colder winters. This period that we're in, which is a declining period of activity from the solar maximum that occurred a few years ago down to solar minimum, it's not the best period to get colder winters, but with minimal sunspot numbers, you can't rule out the chance, certainly of cold spells, cold interludes, albeit the likelihood of getting a classically cold winter is quite low at this point in the solar cycle. Big thank you to James for keeping the GWV Solar Tracker updated. So, interestingly, the Arctic oscillation has actually gone positive. So, just come back to the tracker for a moment. This period where we had the increase in solar activity during the start of December appears to coincide, it's probably just a coincidence, but it appears to coincide with the Arctic oscillation lifting up into positive territory. So this is the Arctic oscillation observed and forecast chart. The black line here is where the Arctic oscillation has been. The red lines where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic oscillation to go. Remember, this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere over the North Pole. It isn't actually driving anything, just telling you what the atmosphere is doing. So whilst we was in this declining phase, or declining period, through the autumn, when we did winter updates, all the trend lines in solar activity were moving downwards, so we found that the Arctic oscillation was generally going negative. It's trending negative. We had quite a long run of negativity within the Arctic oscillation through October and November, telling us we had a fair amount of blocking. Now, this spike in activity that we had at the start of December, just there, does appear to have coincided with the Arctic oscillation going positive. Now, whether this would be down to the ramp up in sunspot numbers that we had at the beginning of December, it's hard to say. Probably it's just a coincidence, but it is interesting how the increase in some sunspot numbers at the beginning of December has coincided with reducing the blocking and returning to sort of a more typical setup, which is low pressure in the Arctic, keeping the cold air up there, and of course the mid-latitudes, i.e. UK, Europe, tends to be milder. Now the forecast chart, part of the chart, shows that we've got a big split between the GFS ensemble members as to what is actually going to happen as we go through into the second half of December. So this is 16th of December just here, where we are going to be positive with the Arctic oscillation at that point. After that, though, well, several members of the ensembles are very positive with the Arctic oscillation, so that continues where we are right now, with low pressure in the polar region and probably producing strong westerlies across the Atlantic. But there are several members that are going really negative as well, so you couldn't make a prediction, really, as to what's going to happen through the second half of December, and particularly through the latter stages of the month. There is potential there to return back to blocking. The North Atlantic oscillation is very similar, so we have the black line here, which is the observed part of the North Atlantic oscillation. The red line's the forecast part of the chart. Now, this is generally in negative territory. Quite interesting that we've got through December so far. We've had the North Atlantic oscillation in quite a negative state, while the Arctic oscillation has been in a more positive state. So the Atlantic is sort of fighting against the polar region, against the Arctic to some degree. Very often it's the other way around. You have low pressure in the polar regions, and then it goes sort of high pressure, goes to blocking, so the Arctic oscillation goes negative, whilst the North Atlantic oscillation is positive. We've done it the other way around through the first part of December, which is quite unusual. The trend generally, with the forecast part of the chart, is to keep the North Atlantic oscillation rather negative. There are some members of the ensemble that are going positive, but I think the overall trend there is to keep things negative. So the Atlantic isn't in too bad a state, actually, to be producing some colder weather. It's just that we haven't got the blocking over the pole to push that cold air down into the mid-latitudes. But if we get the Arctic Oscillation going negative, with the North Atlantic Oscillation also negative, then we could be in business to get some colder conditions. We've had a bit of a cooling in the stratosphere. This is the temperature at 30 HPA over North Pole from the JMA, Japanese Meteorological Agency. Now, you remember that through most of the autumn, we was actually quite warm in the stratosphere over the North Pole. Very little cooling taking place, but over this opening period of December, again, it's all changed really. We have seen quite a big drop in temperatures at 30 HPA, which is sort of one of the top layers of the atmosphere over the North Pole. So cooling is taking place there. Now, this isn't a crash yet, but we wouldn't want to see this black line going down much lower if we want cold weather, because if you've got a cold stratosphere over the North Pole, it reduces greatly the chance of getting blocking over the pole. What we're looking for is have a warm stratosphere over the pole and potentially, of course, a sudden stratospheric warming. And if you have a sudden stratospheric warming, what would happen is this black line would shoot up rather like that. No sign of that. We are actually cooling things down over the North Pole right now. So we've got to wait and see where this goes. It's not too bad at that moment. It's still quite close to trend, but we wouldn't want to see this doing something like that, this black line. If we did, it would greatly reduce the chance of getting blocking, especially through the middle and later part of the winter. So this is how the GFS is predicting temperatures to go over the North Pole during the next couple of weeks. This is looking at, I think it's looking at 10 HPA, actually, which is slightly higher up than 30 HPA. But nevertheless, the blue area here is where the cold stratospheric temperatures are over the North Pole. We're looking to penetrate these yellow colours into the polar region to keep pressure on the polar vortex. So we run through and we see that we do get a bit of warming pushing in towards the polar region, actually, towards the middle part of December. And it looks like the polar vortex via these cold temperatures in the stratosphere still being put under some degree of pressure, although for the Greenland area that is actually quite cold in terms of those stratospheric temperatures, running out beyond that into the second half of December. So we keep the cold stratosphere going over the top of the North Pole. No sign really of any warming beginning to penetrate through there into the second half of the month, and then we run up towards the Christmas period and we still keep those blues and purples going over top of the pole. So it looks like this cold stratospheric temperature that we've got at the moment after a warm side is probably going to continue up towards Christmas anyway. There's no sign of a warming event taking place, so that may be a little bit discouraging for anyone who wants colder conditions. It may be a little bit discouraging if you want blocking through the course of the middle part of the winter, because the polar vortex was put under pressure via those warm stratospheric temperatures earlier in the season, so through October and November. There's always a time lag on this, so I expect the polar vortex to still be rather weak and disruptive for the next few weeks, next 2 or 3 weeks. But if this cooling is maintained as we get through into the middle and latter part of January and then into February, may well be that the polar vortex will re-intensify. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. Just have a look at GFS temperature precipitation ensembles the next 2 weeks. The red line here is the 30-year temperature average. Now, we've got a lot of high pressure coming up over the next couple of weeks, I think. So these upper air temperatures are going to be less important in terms of what's happening down on the surface. They generally paint a milder than average picture. Generally, the trend is above the red line, above the 30-year temperature average. But what you have to factor in is that a lot of these are going to be high pressure dominated. I'll talk you through the scenarios for Christmas Day in a moment. A lot of these will be high pressure dominated, so down on the surface they could actually be significantly colder under high pressure than these ensemble members would lead you to believe. So not quite as important with this over, particularly the period from the weekend onwards. This area just here, early on in the graph, is okay. It is going to be fairly mild for the next few days going up towards the weekend. But beyond that, I think these become a little bit less significant as we're getting through into the run-up towards Christmas. Precipitation spikes. We have got some precipitation coming up, but overall fairly dryish conditions really for the time of year. It should be pretty wet this time last year. It's very wet, of course, with severe flooding. So, yes, there will be rain coming and going at times, especially in the west, less so in the east. But overall, you wouldn't look at that and say we're going to have a particularly wet period at all. So, this how the GFS is looking for Thursday then, and it's still let battle commence really. We've still got high pressure in over Scandinavia there. We've got low pressure in the Atlantic, so low pressure's trying to bring in these westerly winds, high pressure trying to bring in cold easterly winds. Overall, it's fairly mildish. There's probably some rain in the west. We're in a bit of a no man's land, really. Another weather system coming in on Friday, that perhaps producing more generalised rain in the west. I would think east airs tend to keep a fair amount of dry weather. And then into next weekend, we find high pressure sort of building across the country. Its centre is actually over Germany and Poland. There's quite a lot of cold air. At least cold surface air across Central Europe. So that is bringing in fairly coldish flow. It doesn't look particularly cold scenario, but because Central Europe at this point is pretty cold, we would be finding certainly night frost and fog occurring over next weekend. And then beyond that, in towards Monday and Tuesday, we just keep high pressure very close to the country. There's some sort of little disturbance within the upper atmosphere there, maybe producing bit of rain for the south, but to be honest, it is high pressure all the way into the run-up towards Christmas. This takes us to day 10, which is Wednesday 21st of December, and it's just high pressure really all the way, stretching from the Atlantic over towards the Black Sea. Very unusual and quite bizarre looking chart there. And then beyond that, towards Friday 23rd, we tried to bring in another weather system from the Atlantic. But it looks very settled, this. If it was summer, we would be talking about heat wave conditions. This would be classic sort of charts. These would be classic charts for hot summer weather. So if you don't like hot weather just as well, it's the middle of winter and not middle of summer. This is the ECMWF for Thursday, and again we've got high pressure to the east and low pressure out to the west into weekend. We tried to bring this low pressure in on Friday, but it looks like it's stalling out to west with the high dominant to the eastern side of the country. And then over the weekend, again, very similar to what GFS is doing with this high pressure taking over and probably pulling in quite cold surface air, not upper air, but quite cold surface air from Central Europe. So an increasing risk of frost and fog next weekend. And then that just continues through into the following weeks. This takes up to day 10, which is Wednesday 21st of December, where again, just as with the GFS, high pressure is dominant, stretching from the UK and Ireland out to the west over towards the Black Sea in the east. Would be lots of fog and frost with that, especially for central parts of Europe where it could be really very cold. And quite severe fog is possible with that, which of course running up to Christmas could be quite disruptive. Talking of Christmas, just talk you through the GFS ensemble options for Christmas Day. We did this last Sunday and it seemed to go down quite well, so I'll talk you through each ensemble member now. Remember, each line here on this graph, so each sort of line of spaghetti is one individual member of the GFS ensembles, and GFS ensembles look like this. So this is ensemble member number 1 on Christmas Day. We find that we've got high pressure more or less through the country, so very quiet conditions, maybe a bit of rain or sleet across northern Scotland, but generally that's a dry Christmas Day. Probably fairly mildish with temperatures about average. Could be frost, of course, at night. We go through to ensemble member number 2, and the problem with this new version of Web Essential is that the website is running very, very slow, so I might not be able to do this for you. This is how ensemble member number 2 is looking. This one has high pressure through the country, and it is a more colder scenario. The air around this high pressure is coming in more or less from the north or from the northeast. Scandinavia and eastern parts of Europe looking very cold on that one. Have a look at ensemble member number 3 if we can. We might not be able to do this because the website is running very, very slowly, the new version of Web Essential. I'm not sure quite what's happened, why it's running so slowly. So I think we're probably going to have to give up on this idea, unfortunately. The charts aren't loading up quick enough, so I think probably going to have to call a halt to things there, unfortunately. I've got on some member number 3, which is very, very stormy with a deep area of low pressure. I'll just try another one for you, ensemble member number 5, see how quickly that loads up. So this is number 5, trying to come up right now. Again, as I say, the new version of Web Essential is a beta version. I don't think they'll be going fully live with it until next year, and I assume they're having a few technical glitches. So ensemble member number 5, Christmas Day, looks very settled. And so on we go with the ensembles looking quite split for Christmas Day. There are a few colder options with high pressure and blocking up to the north and to the northeast. But they aren't really all that dominant, those colder options. So I think better give up on that. I don't think the website is running quick enough to be able to pull that off. Sorry about that. If I can get another video up for you in a day or so's time, we will run through those GFS ensemble members. So that's how we're looking for the next weekend. Lots of high pressure coming up from next weekend through to run up to Christmas. Could be frost and fog in with that. And there may be some colder conditions coming out of Germany over the weekend. We have to watch out for that. It does look really cold for Central Europe, and that will get caught up, I think, within this high pressure that we've got coming up at the weekend. And that might continue as we start to move into the run-up towards Christmas. Right, later on today, we'll have the interpretation of the ECMWF model, so the seasonal model. That's going to go from January through to March. Come back for that this afternoon. Right, that's all for now, and thanks for watching.